So I'm beginning to realize the downside of doing my video on Wednesdays is that I go out drinking almost every Tuesday, so I end up being like, Okay, so welcome to week 3, guys, and our theme this week is the paranormal, supernatural, extra out there craziness. So this is probably a topic that's going to span multiple weeks throughout the channel. I'm sure we all have more stories to tell than what we can cram into one video. So I guess, again, it's just kind of going to be like a highlight of some of our more prominent experiences or our first experience with the supernatural. So the first thing that comes to mind for me, I've got a couple, actually. Ever since I was a kid, like I've mentioned before, I was always kind of in tune with the otherworldly crap and had feelings about things. One of my earliest remembrances is when we first moved into our house. I grew up in one house, and then in like 1992, I think we moved into a new house. And when we moved in there, there had been a previous resident of the house, the family that moved out. The family member died. She died of cancer, and I believe she died in the house. And I remember one night I couldn't sleep. I just was really, really tired, but I just couldn't sleep because I had a test tomorrow in class, and I was stressing out about it. Yeah, I was stressing out about tests, even at that young of an age. But anyway, I just remember laying in my bed, and I looked up, and I always slept with my door cracked. I was right across from my parents' room, so there was like a sliver of light coming in. And I remember the light got a little bit brighter, and I thought it was the light coming from the cracked door, but actually the light was behind my door. So like here's the crack of the door, and then this is the rest of the door to my wall, and it was coming from here, and it just became kind of like this sliver, pillar-ish thing of light, and it kind of resembled like a human form very vaguely, very amorphous, like not really very well formed. And I just remember, seeing like a kind of brunette-haired woman standing at me and just smiling at me and nodding. And I fell right asleep. I just got this sense of comfort, I got this sense of safety, security, and I passed the fuck out. Later on down the line, I actually was able to locate a picture of the woman that had passed away, and sure enough, it was her. Her name was Edie. And she was actually interred just up the street. The family had actually owned this farm at the end of my neighborhood's road, and they had built a mausoleum, the kind where it was flat walls and you took off a plate to put the coffin in. She was buried there in the mausoleum, and I started visiting her on a regular basis and just kind of talking to her. And like every time I visited her, I just continued to get that sense of comfort, that sense of, presence. And she was present in the house until it burned down. Sadly, our house burned down. It was 92 that it burned down. We moved in 89, that's right. Our house burned down in 92, and her presence, I guess, she moved on. But I also remember in that very same house that burned down, there was just this one night. It was a very scary experience. I woke up, and there was this like very short, squat, shadowy figure standing in the doorway to my room with its hand on my doorknob. And the closest thing that I can say that it resembled was one of the goblins from the movie Labyrinth, if you remember them, but it was more sinister looking. It was just kind of standing there, and it was the same kind of thing. It was not fully formed. It was kind of like a blotchy figure, and it was just kind of staring there, but the weird thing was that it had red eyes. Now, mind you, this could have been me as an overimaginative child, but it was such a sense of dread and such a sense of realism that this thing was standing there staring at me. But I remember that I sensed Edie's presence again, and the thing kind of went away. Like, it disappeared. Like, I didn't see her light, but I just got a whiff of perfume, and this little nasty troll thing standing in my doorway kind of disappeared. So that was kind of my earliest experience of something a little bit out of this world, per se. As I was growing up, I would repeatedly encounter various experiences. Like, I remember going to a graveyard once, and I saw a woman standing over a tombstone, the very typical ghost story. I saw a woman that she was in this like long Victorian-style gown, and I looked away, looked back, and she was gone. But it was an open field. There were no trees. So if she had been walking away, I would have seen her. So those are the kind of things that I've experienced. And the weird thing, I think, with these is that you don't have a sense of control. Like, you don't control when you see them, when you don't, when they go away. You can't turn it off. It just kind of happens. So for a long time for me, that was the scariest aspect of it, was that, you know, these visions would happen. I would see or feel these things, and it was just kind of like, holy shit. Um, but these also tie into what led me down the pagan path that I am, you know, kind of how do I deal with this? How do I explain what I'm feeling and seeing and so on and so forth? Um, One of the more prominent experiences that I had that scared the bejesus out of me is there is an abandoned asylum or hospital, whatever you want to call it, called Glendale. It's in Maryland. And I believe it was used as, I can't remember if it was actually a sane asylum at one point, but I believe it was used for tuberculosis victims. It was a hospital, has, you know, full campus type hospital, not just, you know, one building. It had like multiple buildings connected by tunnels. So I believe it was actually an asylum at one point, but it was closed down, I believe, in the 70s. And ever since then, it's been a hotbed for, or a hot point for urban explorers, you know, people who like to explore ruins of the modern day. And my friends and I, of course, got a wild hair up our ass and decided that we were going to go visit there one night. And this place is creepy as fuck. First of all, you've got to sneak in through, like, the side or the back through this marsh because they have it guarded, so you're breaking the law to get in there. And then when you're there, it's just pitch black dark. You have to have your flashlight, and it's just these abandoned hallways. It looks like an abandoned college, basically. Um, but there is just, when I set foot near the first building, it was just like a pressure placed on my chest. It was like this overwhelming sense of like someone had put an anvil on my chest, and I was having a hard time breathing. And I told my friends, I'm like, I've never felt something like this before, but it's giving me a queasy feeling in my stomach. I'm having a hard time breathing. I don't think this is a good idea. But of course, they talked me out of my apprehension, and we continued to explore. Um, we went into one of the main buildings, and I remember there was this, you know, it's a long hallway, very dark, but the moon was shining in through various broken windows and whatnot. And I remember we were kind of standing there smoking cigarettes and taking a break from exploring. And this is such a cliche, but it still scares the shit out of you. We heard a laugh, and then we turn and look because we heard this like squeaking, weird, like metallic kind of sound, and we turn, and there's a wheelchair rolling out of one of the rooms. Like someone had pushed it slowly, or was pushing it, and it just kind of slowly eased its way into the hallway and stopped. And then we saw this, it almost was like a shadow, I guess, I don't know, come from that room. And so we freaked out, but we ran up there because we thought somebody was playing tricks on us. We got to the doorway, and it was an empty patient's room. There was no door. There was only a small window where the moonlight was coming through, but there was nowhere for someone to go. So if there was a shadow, this was on, like, I can't remember what floor it was, but there was basically nowhere someone could have gone, and it wasn't really possible that we would have seen a shadow of somebody walk past the window because the window was raised up. But yeah, that was really creepy. And then they wanted to go view the morgue, and while we were in the morgue, oh god, children's laughter, and it makes my skin crawl talking about it. Like, I actually heard children's laughter, and it was kind of like that Pet Cemetery, like, I will play with you, you know, type laughter that just gets under your skin. Progressively this entire time, my skin is fucking crawling, and I later learned that when I get that feeling, I need to listen to it, because this place was full of so much sadness, and when you have such a concentration of sadness, and you have such a high concentration of death and anger and all those other emotions, you know, the spiritual energy is just, it's almost palpable. And in the years since then, I've continued to experience things. I actually recently, I live about a mile away from the Bull Run battlefield here in Virginia, and I got a wild hair up my butt the other night, and I drove down it in the middle of the night because I just kind of wanted to experience it for myself. And you can kind of start to hear the very, very dim echoes of gunfire and screams and, you know, all of that. And there was just this overwhelming stench of decomposition coming in through the windows. And that could be something that was explainable, but it was there. And as I was going back, and I drove up and down the road a couple times, fog started to roll in, and I was starting to get the impression of silhouettes in the fog. And when the fog started hitting the road, that was when I was like, all right, it's coming to the road. I'm getting the fuck out of here. There's also been, you know, visual aside, I've also heard things. I also tend to get very, very very palpable feelings. I went to Harpers Ferry, West Virginia, and in one part of Harpers Ferry, there's this, oh, Mischief wants out. Okay, baby, come on. There's this tunnel that leads under the railroad tracks, and it's only, like, it's not even that long. You can see the end. It's maybe, like, it's like a quarter of a half a mile, like, very, very short tunnel. But it's very dark, and it's barred off with wrought iron gates. And I remember we were walking up, because it was nighttime when we went there, we were going to go up onto the railroad bridge, and as I walked past it, I just got, like, you know, smacked with this massively horrible feeling. And I turned and looked at my friends, and I'm like, somebody died in there. And they were just like, how the fuck do you know that? And I'm like, you don't feel that. It was just this overwhelming sense of dread, this stomach turning, and just, you got the impression that, you know, something bad happened. Yeah, and there were even more experience. Harper's Ferry, if you ever want to experience, yeah, go there and go to the burnt down church, and then walk to the top of the mountain and sit in the graveyard. It's one of my friends who really was not that in tune with the supernatural. She went with me one time, and it was daytime, and she literally was like, I'm on sensory overload. She's like, I usually don't sense things. She's like, but this is ridiculous. I can feel my skin crawling, and I feel like someone's watching me. And I was like, welcome to my world every day. But okay, I'm going to cut it off at that, because that's just kind of, again, there's a lot that we can talk about on this subject, but this was kind of, I guess, just kind of a survey of some of the experiences that we've had. I've had even more dark and serious experiences, but to talk about those, like, they would each take up an entire video. So for now, I'm going to go, and I hope you guys are enjoying the channel, and we will have a new Friday coming for you soon, hopefully. And I will talk to you later.